Okay, so Zev's heard part of this, but I need to say some of it every year, and I thought of new things in the car, so... And you're like, I don't remember it, you just expect me to... Okay.
How do you remember you should have remembered that?
What?
How do you remember that he should have remembered what you were about to say?
Because I said it, and I remember that I said it.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Wow.
So one of my my absolute favorite literary methodologies, or literary... what's the word I'm looking for?
Technique.
Thank you. Literary techniques. Thank you. That Tanakh uses to highlight messages is the way it plays with names and anonymity. No. I'll show you what I mean. Now, some of this I said last year, but I was thinking of more of it during it. So let me give you a few. In Shemot, which theoretically is a parsha which is named names, you get this interesting thing that almost everybody in the beginning of Shemot is nameless. This becomes very clear in Perek Bet. Vayelech ish mi bat Levi, vayikach et bat Levi, vatar aisha vateled ben, vaterado kitovu, vatitzbeneu shlosha yerachim. There was a man who was a Levite, who married a woman who was a Levite, and they had a child. Right? Completely anonymous.
I think I was here for this also last year.
Oh, you were actually. Yeah, that's true.
Nice.
I remember that. Wow. So they bring him to the river, and his sister watches, and then who comes? Vatered bat Paro, who also has no name. Right? Nobody has a name. Who's the first person who gets a name? Moshe. In the first Perek. Also, who's the only people who have a name? So after you have the summary, right? Obviously you have Elish Shemot, Bnei Yisrael, B'nai Mitzrayim. The names of all the people the previous generation, they're named. But once you get to this generation, so who do you have? You have Vayakam Melech Chadash Al Mitzrayim Asher Lo Yadeh Yotzei. You have king, right? He's not even called Paro, even though Paro is generic. But in this Perek, he's not even Paro, right? And you have, and he says to his people, Hava nitchak malo, v'asim olav sarim misim. There are officers, there's a king, there are people who are named Shifra and Puah. Right? They're the only people with names. And what we talked about last year is that this seems to be intentional. In the first Perek, everyone who's worried about themselves and worried about perpetuating themselves and protecting themselves
doesn't have a name.
Has no name. The people who are willing to risk their lives to help someone else have names. We care about them. And we said the place in Tanakh that is the most clear is in Ruth. Right? Ruth is the classic of this because the person who says, I cannot marry Ruth because it might lead to the loss of my children and my family and my reputation forevermore is known as Ploni Almoni, which is Mr. Anonymous. Right? So if you don't care about other people's legacies, it'll be your legacy that's lost, not theirs. Boaz, who cares, obviously marries, and eventually has David. Right? That is very, very clear. And here the same thing is true. Shifra and Puah, they care about others, they get a name. And we noted that with Moshe, it's funny, because Moshe has a name, but he also doesn't have a name. And this is what we point out from the Netziv, that Moshe only has a name if you interpret his name in Hebrew, because his name in Egyptian means son. Right? As the Netziv points out, Ram Seis, it just means Ra Moses, or Moses, which is the son of Ra. Moshe, or Moses, just means son. It has no meaning. It's like junior. It's not really a name. It only has a name if you interpret in Hebrew, because Moshe only has a name if he claims his Hebrew identity. If he doesn't, he remains son. He remains, right, nothing. And constantly, Parashat Shemot is playing with this notion of names. But, so that you all know. But what I was thinking about in the car is that I think there's even more to it. And this I don't think I said last year. Right? Because there's something else in the background, which is what name is actually the most important here. What name is really the point of Shemot? Thank you. Right? That Shemot is in fact about names, but it's more about God's name. And it's not just this scene where we play with names, but we have a much more intense name scene.
Like a snake.
Right now, it's not in this week's parsha, but to understand the theme. Sorry, it is here. No, it is here. The second one is later, right? Right. You have the repeat in Va'era. But let me just get it. I know. I just want to get the pasuk. One second. Parak Dalid. Well, right. Well, okay. No, before that. But it goes for a while, actually. Right? Yeah. So it's he goes to the sneh. He gets the burning bush, and first he says, "Vayomer Anochi Elohei Avicha LeAvram LeYitzchak LeYaakov VaYasher Moshe Panav Kirei Me'abit El Elohim." So he says, "I am God," and then he says, "Ra'o Ra'iti Rani Ami Asher B'Mishamet Agadam Shamati V'nei Noksav Ki Adati Et Machal Vav." And they have this conversation, but Moshe says to God, "That's not enough, right? I don't know what's going on." What does he say? Vayomer Moshe Elo Elohim Mi Anochi Ki Elech Al Paro V'Chiotzi Et Bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim. He says, "Who am I? Who am I that I should take them out?" And he says, "Well, I'll be with you." And he says, "That's great. And who are you?" Right? Vayomer Moshe Elohim Hinei Anochi Ba'el Bnei Yisrael V'Amarti Lehem Elohim V'Zechem Shalchani Lechem V'Imru Lo Ma Shemo Ma Omar Lehem. Moshe tells you know what's going to happen? The theme of this entire thing is they are going to want to know one thing. Who is this God of which you speak? Now that's funny, because who else is going to ask a question like that? Paro. Who is this God that I should be afraid for him? And the Ramban tells you, right, not here, but much later in Chumash, that what is the point of the entire world?
Recognizing God.
Which is, in the language of Chumash, is called? Recognizing Shem Hashem.
Yes.
Being Mekadesh Shem Hashem. God's reputation in this world is his shame, is his name. That is literally the point. So much so that it's the point that, when does the Ramban say it? He says it in several places. It's the point. Therefore what? Why is that important? I mean, that's important in and of itself. Why is it important that the point of the world is God's name? Because Moshe uses it to save the Jews several times when they don't deserve it by saying, God, you've attached your name to the Jewish people. The way you're manifest in this world is through the Jewish people. If you kill the Jewish people, all the reputation you've built up will go in the garbage. And Hashem says, you're right, I can't kill them the Egel. You're right, I can't kill them the Raglim. In Hazinu, Moshe predicts that this will be true till the end of time. In Tehillim it happens, right? In Yechezkel it happens. Over and over throughout Tanakh, the argument that successfully is made is that even the Jews don't deserve it. Once God said, the way I manifest in this world and I express my reputation is through the Jews,
they can't be destroyed.
They can't be destroyed because they're attached to me. So what I was thinking about in the car is that, wait a second, the first half of Shemot tells us how people become important, how they get identities, how they get names. But if you think meta, what the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim is, in a nutshell, as the Ramban understands it by the Egel, based on Moshe, is the point of this entire process, Yetziat Mitzrayim, was so the world would come to recognize your name. And the way you chose to do that was by attaching your name to the Jews. So they became synonymous. That was how you chose to do it. That is the story. That's what Ramban is telling you. I mean, Ramban says it's also the point of the world. But it's definitely the point of Mitzrayim. That's what Moshe says. What are people going to say? That this nation you took out of Mitzrayim, you couldn't bring them into Eretz Yisrael. The act of taking the Jews out of Mitzrayim as his nation was an act of God giving himself a name in this world. And how do I know that God didn't have a name before?
Because he didn't call himself.
Thank you, because God says it. He says they knew all my names, but my real name, Hashem, lo nodati lahem. Right? There's a sense in which this act of Mitzrayim is God coming out of all those other names and naming himself as Yud Kei Vav Kei, or making himself known as Yud Kei Vav Kei. The experience of Mitzrayim, of Yetziat Mitzrayim, is God playing with his own name and saying, I used to have a certain identity, but now I'm coming into my own. Not obviously in his own essence, but in terms of the way he expresses himself in the world. So I think it's striking that the first half of Shemot is about people coming into their identity as the backdrop for God saying, I'm coming into my own, but the way I come into my own is through attachment to the Jewish people. And then if you continue, when he says, and what is your name, he doesn't, what should he have said? Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? Because that was what he just said. He just said, I'm introducing myself as Yud Kei Vav Kei, but that's not what he says. What does he say? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, which, according to Chazal, is what? I will be with the Jews in future tzarot, just like I'm with them now. Meaning, according to Chazal, what is the name Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh? It's a statement of the fact that he is with the Jewish people, which is exactly the point. Right? That the story here, yes, on the one hand, he's becoming known as Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the story with Paro. Who is this Yud Kei Vav Kei that I should know? I don't know who he is. So the Mitzrayim story is teaching the world who Yud Kei Vav Kei is. The God, the Creator God, everything wrapped up in it. But he also says, you want to tell the Jewish people my identity? My identity is that I will be with them. Right? That's what you need to know for this purpose. Right? Is that I am with them. And therefore this story is not just about people by doing the right thing, getting an identity, and creating a legacy. It's about God explaining how he went from a place where people didn't know his name like Paro, or even the Avot knew him by a different name, and how he comes to create a particular shame, a particular identity in the world through the act of Yetzias Mitzrayim and choosing a nation, and that name, that expression, that reputation, that understanding of God that becomes manifest in the world is dependent on these people that we're talking about, whose identity we're also granting. Right? And therefore, I think that that's why these parts should place so much on name, not just because of what it teaches us about people, but because in the backdrop, this is the story of how God, as he says, changes the way he's viewed in this world. And we talked about this in the Tefillah share, that Atah Kadosh Shemcha Kadosh. Right? Shem Hashem seems to be not his essence, but the way he manifests himself in the world, the way people come to know him. And in many ways, the whole story of Yetziat Mitzrayim is that. And again, we'll see it over and over, but the fact that beginning speech to Paro is, Paro, who is this God that I should be afraid of him? And Moshe says, let me explain to you who this is. And the rest of the story is Moshe showing Paro who this person, but who this God is, who it's not a person, it's the God. And it's a story of him taking out the Jewish people and therefore them becoming Am Hashem with all the theological implications that Moshe outlines later. And therefore, so that was what I was thinking about in the cars, that the name theme becomes much bigger. It's not just about, right, the people. It's about this story of God forging an identity, right? And the Jews are just the vehicle for that, with all the implications that come from that. Okay.